Hey, what's up? In our last presentation, we took a look at the causes of the Great Depression and took a quick look at some of the effects and what people were dealing with. In this presentation, we're going to take a little deeper dive into the 1930s, and we're going to start our discussion on FDR and how he's going to try to tackle some of these issues that he faces when he takes office. All right, so again, as a quick review, you should know that the Great Depression starts with the stock market crash that comes on October 29th, 1929, which is always known as Black Friday. And that it's after that's kind of considered the official start of the Great Depression. Remember, this is an economic depression. So when you hear economic, you think money. So basically anything bad that can happen with relation to money and business does, okay? And you should remember that Herbert Hoover was the president at the start of the Great Depression, and the American people were very, very unhappy with him. They really did not like his attitude, the laissez-faire attitude that, prosperity is just around the corner and that he shouldn't give direct aid to the poor. And, between that and the how he handled the bonus march, forget it. FDR, who ran against him, won in a landslide. Franklin Delano Roosevelt won by a huge, huge margin. And so when he gets to be president, it's like, thanks. It's an honor to be president, I guess. I mean, this guy is walking into a nightmare. All right? FDR gets stuck with just every possible problem under the sun. I mean, that's what this cartoon is saying. He's got to deal with unemployment and bank problems and farm problems and tariffs and economy measure and a budget and war deficit. And it's like, here you go, buddy. It's all yours. And that's what FDR is dealing with. So the most immediate issue that FDR faces, his first day on the job, is having to tackle massive unemployment. I mean, massive. We're talking 25% of people are unemployed. And you got to remember, think about it. In the family, it's not like today where women work, where you got at least 2 paychecks coming in. Oh, no. Back then, the man was basically the only one with a job most of the time. Right? The woman was, the vast majority of women were homemakers. So if you've only got one person who's responsible for supporting the family and that person loses his job, that's everybody's screwed. And then in addition, when you've got 25% unemployment, even if, let's say, your dad got a job and he's secure and he's okay, when, 1 out of every 4 people loses their job, there's probably a good likelihood that somebody else in your family, an uncle, a cousin or whatever, is also going to be unemployed. And they're going to turn to your dad who's got a job and say, hey, could you help me out? Could you lend me some money? You get what I'm saying? So even if you have a job, money's going to be tight. In addition, even though you have a job today, when you see so many people around you losing their jobs and so many businesses around you going under, you're going to be terrified that it's going to hit you next. So, one of the big issues that happens during a depression is people don't spend money. Unemployed people can't buy goods, but even people who are employed are going to want to save their money because they're going to be terrified. What could happen tomorrow? Maybe it'll happen to me. So everybody starts holding on to their money. And when you stop buying goods, I mean, think about it. You're not going to go buy yourself a new wardrobe. You're not going to buy yourself new shoes and a new shirt. You're going to say, let me hold on to my money. Let me keep saving my money. So what happens to the guy who sells the shirts? What happens to the restaurant where you don't go out and eat? You make food at home to save money. You know what I'm saying? All these businesses, they start doing less and less business. And at first they start laying off more workers, creating more unemployed people who can't buy goods or services. And then eventually, if things get really bad, it's going to be like what you see on the left, that these guys go out of business. And once these companies go out of business, all their employees lose their job. And now you've added even more unemployed people, more people who can't afford to buy goods and services. So it's like, you think of you ever hear that expression of a snowball going down the side of a mountain, right? The snowball starts running down the snowy mountain. And what happens as it goes further down, the snowball gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's what it felt like during the Great Depression, that these economic problems are getting just bigger and bigger and bigger. For the next part, if you've kind of lived through the coronavirus, right, we're living through today, your experiences that you've had in the stores, should help you understand what we're going to talk about next. I don't know if you've gone shopping with your parents, but these are photos I've taken. That Costco, which usually has everything under the sun, suddenly I walk into Costco after waiting online for, over an hour to get in there. And, and this is at the very beginning of this thing. This is at the very beginning of the coronavirus, that suddenly I'm walking into Costco and almost everything is out, that they're out of stock and everything. These other photos on the right, in the middle and the right, I took those at Stop and Shop, my local grocery store. And all this is the pasta aisle. These spaghetti and dried noodles, gone. Empty. The shelves empty. And trying to get toilet paper, it's great. It's all gone. Now, why does this happen? I assure you, not everybody in America got diarrhea at the same time. Nobody needs that much toilet paper. You get what I'm saying? And this was, when have you ever, before this coronavirus craziness, back in the day, last year at this time, you walked in to get toilet paper. It was there. It was all over the wall. Pasta, as far as the eye could see, it was never an issue. But what happened? Well, at the very beginning of this coronavirus stuff, people panicked. They said, oh my God, this virus is coming. I'm going to be locked in my home. The goods are going to be, denied. There were all these rumors on social media that everything was going to be terrible. And people ran out to the stores, and in a panic, they bought everything off the shelves. They were like, oh, pasta lasts a long time and it's cheap. Let me buy lots and lots of pasta. And all the soup, they bought all the soup off the shelves, and they picked up toilet paper. I don't know what the toilet paper is. Honestly, I don't. I guess it's one of those things like, if I had to never leave my house for the next 6 months, I want to make sure I can take a poop. I don't know what it is, but everybody panicked and bought all the toilet paper. And especially at the beginning of this, today, like now, legitimately, there are some issues getting things stocked just because so many people are getting sick that, and kind of slow things up. But not to this extent. It gets this bad because people are buying too much. They're buying huge amounts and just socking it away in their home. And what happens is if one person buys 300 rolls of toilet paper, there's not going to be enough for everybody else. You get me? So this panic where people are running to the store and buying everything at the same time, it creates more panic. Because I'm telling you, when I went to the store, I was ready to buy a very normal amount of toilet paper. When I saw shelves like this, I am normally a very calm person. And trust me, the day I found toilet paper on the shelf, I friggin' grabbed it like it was gold. Like I was like, how much should I buy? I was like buying extra. I may never see the toilet paper again. I got to get plenty. You get what I'm saying? And that's what ends up happening. People get into a panic and they grab it all. So if you understand that kind of panicked buying, this next piece of history may make more sense to you. So I guess that's the silver lining of seeing toilet paper not being on the shelf. Here you go. You can understand the Great Depression. So what happens is you guys should remember that we talked about how banks work, right? That banks don't make money. People deposit their money in the bank, right? Like I have $1,000, let's say, and I put that in the bank, and the bank holds on to my $1,000 for me because it's got lots of security and things like that. And it sits it there and it's not in my wallet. So I'm less likely to spend it. So I put it in the bank. And the bank holds on to my money. And in exchange for being able to hold on my money, the bank will pay me interest. So if I, if I sit the money in there for like a year, I won't get $1,000 back. I'll get let's say $100 back or whatever. I'll make money off my money. So lots of people deposit money in banks. Okay. And we said the banks aren't making money from holding on to people's money. The way banks make money is that they loan money to people. You get what I'm saying? So for example, when I went to buy my car, I didn't have all that money on hand. I had to take out a loan. And when I borrowed all the money to buy my car, right, I take out a loan from the bank and I say, pay me, whatever, $10,000, $20,000 to buy my car. The bank loans me that money. And I say, all right, I'm going to pay back the $20,000 plus more. You will make a profit on lending me this money. That's how banks make money. Banks make money by loaning out money. Well, the question is, where do the banks get all this cash that they use to make these loans? Well, they get their cash from everybody who deposited their money. Okay? When you deposit your money, you are letting the bank hold on to your cash. And the bank doesn't just sit with your cash and let it gather dust in a box somewhere in a vault. It takes your money and loans it out to people, right? And what happens is as long as people who borrow money pay back all that money, everything's going good. Because, at the end of the day, if I put my money in my bank account, it's not like I'm going to look for it today or tomorrow. I'm going to let it sit there for years. So I don't care what happens to it between now and when I need it. You can do whatever you want with it. As long as when I go to pull it out, as long as you have enough money to pay me back, we're good. So that's why banks keep a little bit of money on hand. They keep cash on hand to make loans and cash on hand to pay back people who put in their deposit. But they don't have to keep every single dollar in hand, right? So that's what ends up happening. So banks are cooking along. They take in your deposits, they loan out some of the money, and everything's working fine. But what happens is during the Great Depression, something goes wrong. Suddenly, all those loans that the bank was making, people stop paying back their loans. The people just stop paying. So now the bank has lost, remember your money that you deposited? That money's gone because they lent it out to somebody who won't pay it back. Now, as long as you don't ask for your money, the bank has time to get back more cash. And, as long as you don't ask for it, it's not like a big deal. The problem is when lots and lots and lots of people stop paying back their loans. And suddenly, lots and lots of customers say, hey, you know what? I'm going to need my cash back. You know what? I deposited that $1,000 with you, bank. I'm going to need that money back. And you start taking your money out. And then your neighbor says, you know what, I put money in the bank too. I'm going to need that back. Times are tough. I need more cash. And they start pulling out the bank. And more people pull out. More people. Suddenly, if everybody takes out their money and nobody is paying back their loans, the bank is going to run out of cash. And then the bank goes out of business. And here's the worst thing about it. And this is the reason why you are going to have what you see in the picture. You're going to see lines around the block. The reason you see lines around the block is this. If you pull out your money early, you get all your cash back, no problem. But if you wait and your bank goes out of business and you go, I have $1,000 at, Millbury Savings Bank, let's say. I have $1,000 in Millbury Savings Bank. And you pick up the newspaper and you read, Millbury Savings Bank has gone out of business. Your $1,000 is gone. Never see it again, it's gone. If you do not pull out your money before the bank goes out of business, you lose it all. You have to get your money before the bank goes out of business. If you wait and that bank goes out of business and you didn't get your money out in time, it's lost, gone, vanished. So what happens is, as you can imagine, people start getting panicky and they start grabbing out the cash. And like I told you, if everybody pulls out their cash at the same time, just like the store ran out of toilet paper and pasta, the bank is going to run out of money. If everybody looks for the same thing at the same time, the bank is not going to have enough money on hand to pay back everybody at the same time. Now, you may say to yourself, well, it's the bank's fault. The bank went out of business because it did bad debt. Remember, why was the bank in this problem? Well, look at that. People started defaulting on their loans. People didn't pay back their what they borrowed. If the bank wasn't so stupid, if the bank had been a little smarter and the bank had only lent money to people who could pay it back, they wouldn't be in this mess. It's the bank's fault. The bank shouldn't lend money to people who can't pay it back. What ends up happening during the Great Depression is even banks that do the right thing, that are run in a responsible way, who only lend money to people who can pay it back, even those banks go out of business. So let me show you what happens. Let's say you have a bank that's doing great. Okay? It is lending out money to people who are really responsible and they are making all their payments on time. And they've got plenty of deposits on hand from people. And they have a nice chunk of money, in the bank. They're not broke. They have a lot of money on hand to be able to make more loans and pay back a few people if they want to take out their money. And like I said, they have more money coming in every day from people who are paying back their loans. And they are doing the right thing. This is a bank on solid financial ground. What happens is during the Great Depression, there could be a rumor, literally a rumor, no fact, just a rumor. Hey, I heard that Chase is going out of business. I heard they're going to go bankrupt. I heard they're in bad way. A rumor could start to spread. And based on a rumor, people would panic. Suddenly, based on a rumor, not based on a business, on the bank's bad business practices. I'm talking about a rumor that the bank was doing badly. Was enough to send people running to get their cash back. They would run to the bank to get their money out. Even if, and the bank is like, listen, we're doing fine. Here, you can get your money back. No worries. You can get your money back. We're doing fine. We're doing fine. But if every single person in that bank asked for their money at the same time, and I'm telling you, if you drive by a bank and you start seeing a line of customers outside that bank, you're going to get your butt on the back of that line. You probably had no intention of pulling out your money. But once you see all those people lining up, you're like, screw this. I got to go run on the line. Because if you don't, and that bank goes out of business and those people know something you don't, you're going to lose everything. So what happens is even a rumor would cause people to run. That's why they call it bank runs. People would run to the bank to get all their money out. And lo and behold, the bank collapses. Even though the bank was in good shape and was doing great business. Literally, the fear of a bank collapse would be enough to cause a bank to collapse. It was crazy. By March 1933, you have 13 million unemployed and almost every single bank was closed. People stopped trusting the U.S. financial system. People would not put their money in banks. They started putting the money in the mattress. That's where that expression comes from. People start putting their money. They sock it away. They hide it in their houses. They don't trust the banks anymore. And that becomes a problem because if the banks stop working, now banks can't lend out money anymore. Banks can't lend you money to start a new business. Banks can't lend you money so you can buy a car. Banks can't lend you money so you can buy a house. And this will start to destroy the country's economy long term when you don't have a functioning banking system. And really what's sad about it is if you take a look at the political cartoon, somebody who does really bad, who's broke, who's, homeless, and you say to them, you know what? You were so successful. You were doing good business. You see the squirrel? Why didn't you save money for the future when times were good? Because that's where you turn to somebody, right? Hey, you used to be so successful. You used to have all this money. Well, what are you doing on a soup kitchen line? Why didn't you save money? Why don't you take care of yourself? You used to have a great job making good money. Why don't you set some money aside just in case there's an emergency, just in case something bad happens? And what's the guy on the bench say? I did save money. I did. When times were good, I saved my money. I didn't spend recklessly. I wasn't stupid with my money. I was really responsible with my money. And lo and behold, what happens? If his bank fails, he's a victim of a bank failure. He did everything right. But once your bank goes out of business, you lose all of your savings. Everything that you put aside in case of an emergency is gone. And so you can see on the left what's happening during this Great Depression from 1929 to 1933. These figures are in billions of dollars. So look. People used to spend $19.5 billion on food. Suddenly, just a few years later, like less than 4 years later, about 4 years later, now it's 11.5. It's $8 billion difference. $8 billion in food that people aren't spending. People aren't going to be going to restaurants. People aren't going to be buying expensive meals. People are going to be spending as little money as possible. Look at automobiles. You think you're going to buy a car when you're terrified whether or not you're going to be employed next? Heck, you think you're going to treat yourself to a new outfit? Look at the clothing numbers. From 11.2 to 5.4 billion. You're not going to be buying clothes. You're going to save all your money, right? You're not spend it on a new outfit. Hey, I'll make do with what I got. And what's going to happen? What's going to happen if you stop buying clothes? What happens to all the people who sell the clothes? What happens to all the people who manufacture the clothes? All those people are going to lose them. They're all going to lose their jobs. Their businesses are all going to close, creating more unemployed people. So, like I said, FDR gets elected. Now, this part, it's never on the Regents, but I think it's important to, it's a kind of interesting thing. So I wanted to kind of throw it out there. that FDR was in fact physically disabled. He had some physical challenges. He had gotten polio as a child, so basically his legs were really weak. He was unable to walk. The only reason he is upright, like for example, if you see him in the top right of the screen, the reason he's upright is because he had really, really massive braces on his legs. So I don't know if you've ever seen them, especially in the 1930s. If you picture like a couple of metal bars held to your legs with like leather straps, like if you think of like a leather belt almost, belting these big barred things to your legs. So you can't bend the knees. You get what I'm saying? Like your legs are almost stiff, like a toy soldier kind of thing. You keep your legs really stiff. So he could stand, but he wasn't standing because his legs had enough muscle to hold him. He was standing because of the braces. And that's why whenever he is upright, he's always going to have his hand holding his weight up. So he's going to be leaning on something, and often he's going to be next to somebody who's going to be supporting his elbow. You see how that's his wife next to him, Eleanor Roosevelt. She's holding his arm. So he's got to hold on to people so that he can be steady on his braces. And that's the times where if he's upright, it's because of the braces, because he's kind of supporting his weight with his arms. Very often, whenever you see FDR, you will often see him pose sitting down. So for example, on the bottom right, this would have been the kind of photo that's very common. He's sitting in a car or sitting in a chair or something like that. So he doesn't have to be upright. And this was a concerted effort. FDR did not want people to know that he was disabled. There was a lot of prejudice, a lot against disabilities. That people thought if you're physically disabled, it meant you were weak and things like that. And so he never wanted people to know he was disabled. Even though, as you can see on the left, when he was at home and with his family and in the White House, he was often in a wheelchair because the braces, he couldn't use those all the time. Most of the time he spent in the wheelchair. So there's a debate today over whether or not FDR should be recognized as kind of an icon for disability and disability rights. Because, part of the issue is, he was our first president with a disability. So, he's a landmark in that sense. He was the first person in that sense. But by the same token, is he really a great icon for disabilities, disability acceptance, when he himself hid his disability from everybody? So it's something that's debated today, but it's kind of an interesting piece. But anyway, FDR, he serves for 4 terms. So remember, every presidential term is 4 years. So that's 4 times 4, 16. He actually died before he started, very early in his 4th term. So he actually doesn't serve that long. He serves only from 1933 to 1945, but still, that's a long, long time. He is the leader of the United States, not just during the Great Depression, but also during World War II. So this is 2 of the really just huge turning points in our history, and he was the head of the country. He led the country through both of those. It is after FDR, after he wins that 4th term, he actually died, like I said, in office in the 4th term. So after that, that's when they pass an amendment to the Constitution saying that from now on, presidents can only serve for 2 terms. So you max out at 8 years. Okay. The only exception is if you started your term, like if the president died and you were vice president and you get to serve for, I think it was like 2 years or less, you can do it. So max out at 10. But if you serve, let's say 3 years of the person's thing, you can only do, you can't do more than 10 years. All right. With that, now, one of the interesting things about FDR being disabled, one of the issues, one of the effects of that is the fact that obviously FDR is not going to be as mobile as somebody who had full use of their legs. So what happens is he comes to rely very heavily on his wife, Eleanor Roosevelt. And Eleanor Roosevelt is a feminist icon. She's, and not just that, but just an icon of what a first lady can be, a very active first lady, because she takes on this role as FDR's eyes and ears. So for example, in the bottom left, she's riding in a coal mine with the coal miners trying to understand what they're going through, right? And she's representing the president, by being there. And of course she's there. Can you imagine FDR in his braces trying to do it? There's no way he could have been in that kind of situation. It would have been a little too tough for him. So Eleanor Roosevelt is the one who does it. So she's the one who visits, job sites that are in out of way places, or visits asylums and prisons and all kinds of, these places. And like I said, she was FDR's eyes and ears. So she was the one who would report back to her husband. And like I said, she's just an icon of just, this very strong woman who's, doing a great job in her role as First Lady. And she's known for being a champion of civil rights, much more so than her husband, promoting African Americans and women and things like that. Very, very active and important figure. So her husband's disability gave her, it put her in a much more active role as First Lady than traditionally would have been held. All right, so this is FDR's inaugural address. So that means this is the first speech he gives when he takes the office of presidency. And it's very, very famous. So let me play this for you.
So first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed efforts to convert retreat into advance.
So this is one of the big issues. Like I said, this very famous quote of the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. That is a quote that is, it's always used. I mean, you'll always hear this quote, but that's where it comes from. It comes from FDR. And he's referring to the fact that the U.S. citizens during this period of the Great Depression really have, he's dealing with people's fears. People are terrified that they're going to lose their jobs. People are terrified that the banks are going to shut down. And that terror, that fear is hurting the economy. It's really causing some of the problems. Because again, if you're too scared to spend money, there's no way the economy can recover. The U.S. economy recovers when people start spending money. But everybody's too afraid to spend money. So this is one of the issues, and he kind of tackles that and he addresses that in his inaugural address, is this idea that he has to deal with people's fear, that he has to get people to trust and feel safe with the U.S. economy. And they have to start trusting banks, and they have to start trusting that the country will get better. So one of the things he needs to do is he's got to restore confidence in the banks. The U.S. economy will not get healthy unless people start depositing their money in the banks again. Remember, the banks, that's part of a strong economy, that you have a banking system where people can go and borrow money to start businesses, to buy goods and what have you. And so one of the big issues was, like I said, people were terrified of the banks. They were terrified the banks would go out of business. And so they're not going to deposit their money because they think the money's going to be gone. So one of the first things FDR does is he declares a bank holiday. So the idea of the bank holiday was he makes all the nation's banks shut, and then he goes through their books. And he does not let any bank open unless they are in good financial shape. And the banks that aren't in good financial shape either stay closed or he'll help them, get their books in order or what have you. But that's the idea, is this bank holiday, making all the nation's banks change. It's just shut down. So you can say it's a 4-day emergency bank holiday. But the federal government says, listen, these banks are going to be shut for 4 days. But when they reopen, if they reopen, you can trust them. And that bank holiday, which was a very early thing he did, actually was successful. After the bank holiday, very few U.S. banks started to fail. And people slowly, it didn't happen overnight, but you see people start being more confident in the banks. And you start to see the number of banks closing is much, much smaller. So the bank holiday was a successful first step in restoring people's confidence in the U.S. financial system. In addition, FDR has a very different take on his role and the role of the president versus Hoover. They are like night and day. Herbert Hoover, you remember, he believed in laissez-faire. He believed that prosperity is just around the corner and, people need to, that he shouldn't be giving direct relief for the poor, that people have to kind of pull themselves up by their bootstraps and, that's what's important. FDR had a different attitude completely. He is going to be focused on direct relief for the poor. He is going to create what they call the New Deal, and we're going to take a look at that. And the New Deal is all about trying to not just help businesses, but helping individuals get money and get relief. The other thing, just as a big contrast between FDR and Hoover, is how FDR handles the bonus march. There will be a second bonus march, a couple of years later. What's really interesting is as opposed to Hoover, who sends out the army to get rid of them, FDR sends out his wife. His wife and one of his advisors goes out. They meet with the veterans. They supposedly she goes out with like coffee and cakes, whatever. She gives them food or whatever, and they kind of chat. And it literally has the same effect. The bonus marchers still do not get their bonuses. It's the same outcome. He doesn't have the money to pay them. However, he is able to offer them, as we're going to see, they are going to get some jobs with, there will be job options through his relief programs. So he's able to talk with them that. And later in his term, he is going to be actively working on things like the GI Bill and certain benefits for veterans. But it just is, again, it's just a very different approach to people and how to handle these kinds of issues. And it's much more popular. And again, as part of his efforts to restore confidence in the country, he starts having what he calls the fireside chats. And this is something that other presidents have really copied. In fact, today you can see President Trump, right? He has lots of these, he has these coronavirus briefings. This is, people are really nervous about the virus, so he's giving them updates. Our Governor Cuomo does that, where they kind of have these updates and just let you know what's going on, and here's the latest updates. And it's just to let people to create these kinds of to create some communication, to keep people informed. And it keeps, again, just to restore people's confidence, to get rid of that panic, to get rid of that fear. And a big part of that for FDR was the fireside chats. And like I said, people still copy that today. So let me show you a quick video on that. Here you go.
82 years ago today, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt delivered the first of 30 radio speeches, which came to be known as fireside chats. The addresses comforted American audiences and were designed to inspire confidence in the nation's leaders during the Great Depression. Here's a bit from the first fireside chat families gathered round their radios to hear in 1933.
You people must have faith. You must not be stampeded by rumors or guesses. Let us unite in banishing fear. We have provided the machinery to restore our financial system, and it is up to you to support and make it work. It is your problem, my friends, your problem no less than it is mine. Together, we cannot fail.
So, like I said, and those are FDR's kind of first days in office, but really what he's known for is his New Deal. So like I said, this is FDR has a New Deal. You may remember his cousin Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt offered the American people a square deal. Remember that? Teddy Roosevelt had the square deal. Well, FDR has a New Deal. He's like, listen, forget what Hoover did. I'm leaving that nonsense behind. We're going in a new direction. We're going to do the New Deal. And the New Deal is based on 3 R's. So whenever you think of the New Deal, you think of the 3 R's. Relief, recovery, and reform. Relief is literally by giving direct relief to the poor. It's the government is going to give money or programs and make them available specifically to help individual Americans get money, either through job programs or through a relief check, like literally cash from the government. But that was direct relief to keep people from starving, to keep you from being homeless. Here are some options. Recovery. This was programs designed to get industries back up and running, to help business recover, to come back from bankruptcy, to come back from doing badly, to being more successful. That's recovery. And the last R is reform. To reform something means you're going to fix it. And that's the idea, is that he's going to change some rules of how business is done. He's going to reform the rules to prevent another Great Depression. And that's the idea, is you're going to fix some of the issues in our economy that allowed the country to fail. All right, with that, we're going to leave it off. And in our next presentation, in part 2, we're going to take a much deeper dive into the New Deal and these 3 R's.